Captain Ethan Voss stood in the center of the enormous, silver-lit chamber, feeling the weight of dozens of alien eyes upon him. Tall, armored Xilari guards lined the walls, their reptilian features unreadable. Their glowing yellow eyes watched his every movement, as if waiting for him to make the wrong move. He had been aboard Xilari ships before, during tense negotiations, prisoner exchanges, and even peace talks. But this time, something was different. He had not been brought here as an official diplomat or a military officer. He had been summoned by the most powerful ruler in the Xilari Empire, Queen Zalthera the Eternal. Ethan had heard the stories. Zalthera was a legend, ruling over the Xilari for more than 2 centuries. Some said she was ruthless, an empress who crushed her enemies without mercy. Others whispered that she was brilliant, a leader who had kept the Xilari dominant in the galaxy for generations. No one, human or alien, had ever spoken to her alone like this. The guards parted, and the massive doors at the far end of the chamber slid open. A tall figure stepped through. She was nothing like what Ethan had imagined. Queen Zalthera's presence was overwhelming. She was nearly 8 feet tall, her form draped in flowing dark silks embroidered with alien symbols. Her deep violet skin shimmered under the chamber's soft lights, and her long silver hair cascaded over her shoulders like strands of liquid metal. Her face was sharp yet elegant, with piercing golden eyes that locked onto him with unsettling intensity. When she spoke, her voice was deep yet smooth, carrying the weight of authority. Human. She stopped a few feet away from him, tilting her head slightly. "Do you know why you have been summoned?" Ethan kept his expression neutral. He had faced Xilari warriors in battle, survived political traps, and outmaneuvered hostile alien envoys. But standing before the Queen, he felt a different kind of pressure. "I can only guess, Your Majesty," he said carefully, "but I assume it has something to do with relations between our species." Zalthera's lips curved slightly. It was not quite a smile, but there was something in her expression that made Ethan's pulse quicken. "Yes, I wish to understand humans." She took a slow step forward, not as enemies, not as allies, but as beings. Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What exactly do you wish to understand?" There was a long pause. The Queen studied him with an unreadable expression. Then, in a calm yet deliberate voice, she asked, "Tell me, what's it like to mate with a human?" Silence filled the chamber. Even the Xilari guards, who had remained motionless before, seemed to shift slightly. Ethan blinked. He was sure he had misheard. I'm sorry. What?" Zalthera's gaze did not waver. "What is it like?" She repeated. "Among my kind, such things are mere instinct, practical, functional, but humans speak of it differently. I have read reports, watched your kind interact. You speak of connection, of emotions. You even tie it to something you call love." Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken. This was dangerous territory. He was not just a representative of humanity. He was the first human ever to be asked this question by an alien monarch. He took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. "With respect, Your Majesty, that's not a simple question." The Queen's head tilted slightly. "Then explain it to me." Ethan hesitated. He knew he could not answer carelessly. If he dismissed the question, he might insult her. If he answered too directly, he could cause a diplomatic disaster. Finally, he said, "Humans, we don't see it as just a biological function. It's not just about survival. It's about trust, connection, and emotions. It's about choosing to share something personal with another." Zalthera's golden eyes narrowed slightly, as if analyzing his words. Fascinating. She folded her arms, her long claws tapping against the fabric of her robe. "Then it is true. Humans do not see it as we do." Ethan felt the tension in the air. He had to be careful. "Your Majesty, why do you ask me this?" The Queen took another step forward. "Because I wish to understand your kind, not through treaties or war, but through something deeper." Her voice softened, though it still held its commanding edge. My people have ruled through strength for centuries. But strength alone is not enough. We are facing challenges, and I believe humans may have something we lack. Ethan swallowed. And you believe this understanding can be gained through this topic? Zalthara's eyes glowed slightly in the dim light. Perhaps. She studied him again before adding, or perhaps I merely wish to see if the reports about humans are true. Ethan wasn't sure if that was a test, a challenge, or something else entirely. But one thing was clear: this conversation was only beginning, and whatever happened next would change everything. Ethan felt the weight of the Queen's golden eyes on him. The air in the chamber was thick with tension. The auxiliary guards remained still, their reptilian features unreadable, but he could sense their quiet curiosity. The Queen had just asked a question no human had ever expected from an alien monarch. "Tell me, what's it like to mate with a human?" The words still echoed in Ethan's mind. He had faced war, survived ambushes, and negotiated peace treaties. But this was different. A single wrong answer could change the course of human auxiliary relations forever. He took a steady breath. "Your Majesty, I understand your curiosity. But this is not a simple subject." Zalthara's lips curled slightly, an almost smile. And yet, humans talk about it so easily among themselves. Ethan hesitated. That was true. Humans wrote songs, made movies, and told stories about love and intimacy, but explaining it to an alien queen, that was a challenge he had never prepared for. "It's not just about words," he said carefully. "For humans, it's about emotions, trust, bonding. It's more than just biology." Zalthara took a step closer, her towering presence making Ethan instinctively straighten his posture. "Emotions," she repeated. "Are they so important to your kind?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. Humans don't just form connections because of instinct. We choose. We seek companionship, not just for survival, but because we feel something deeper." The Queen tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "Fascinating. The auxiliary do not form such bonds. We select partners based on genetic compatibility. There is no need for emotions." Ethan wasn't surprised. Many alien species saw relationships as mere survival tactics, nothing more. But he could hear something in her voice, a hint of something unspoken. "Then why ask me this?" he questioned. "If emotions are not important to the auxiliary, why does it matter to you?" For a brief moment, there was silence. The Queen's golden eyes studied him carefully. Then she spoke, her voice lower, more thoughtful. "Because things are changing." Ethan frowned. "Changing how?" Zalthara's gaze flickered toward the guards for a moment before returning to him. "The auxiliary empire is vast, powerful. We have conquered, ruled, and expanded for centuries. But something is missing." She took another step forward, her presence almost overwhelming. "My people do not understand humans. They see your kind as weak because you are guided by emotions, by bonds. And yet, your species has survived against impossible odds. Again and again, humanity defies logic." Ethan remained silent, letting her continue. "I have studied your kind," Zalthara admitted. "Despite lacking our strength, despite not having the strongest weapons, humans win. Not through brute force, but through something else." Ethan exhaled slowly. He had fought in battles where humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet they had survived. "We adapt," he said simply. "We fight for each other. We don't just fight for survival. We fight for the people we care about." Zalthara nodded slowly. "That is what I wish to understand." Ethan met her gaze. "And that's why you're asking about this." A brief pause. Then, to his surprise, Zalthara chuckled softly. "In a way, yes. But it is more than that. The auxiliary see humans as strange because of your bonds. If I am to lead my people into a new era, I must understand the truth." Ethan's mind raced. Was she trying to change the way her empire functioned? Was she looking for a new way to rule? "And you believe understanding human relationships will help?" he asked. Zalthara's expression remained unreadable. "Perhaps, or perhaps I simply wish to see if there is something to learn from you." Ethan knew this conversation was far from over. Whatever the Queen's true intentions were, one thing was clear. She was interested in humanity in a way no Xilari ruler had been before. And that could change everything. Ethan sat in silence, his mind racing. He had faced many strange situations as a diplomat, but this was different. The Queen of the Xilari Empire stood before him, her golden eyes sharp with curiosity. She wanted to understand human relationships, how humans connected, how they bonded, how they loved. Her empire was vast and powerful, built on logic, strength, and strategy. But she had just admitted that something was missing, something that humans had. Ethan cleared his throat. "So, what exactly do you want from me, Your Majesty?" Zalthara's gaze did not waver. "I want to conduct an experiment." Ethan frowned. "An experiment?" The Queen took a step forward. "I wish to experience human bonding firsthand. Not just study it, not just hear about it. I want to know what it feels like." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "That's complicated." Zalthara tilted her head slightly. "Why? You said humans form connections based on emotions. Why is it difficult?" Ethan sighed. "Because emotions can't be forced. It's not like a science experiment where you mix two things and get a result. It happens naturally, over time." The Queen seemed to consider this. "Then we will do it over time." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "I do not waste words, human." Her tone was calm, but there was an intensity in her voice that sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He had no doubt she was completely serious. "How do you plan to do this?" he asked cautiously. Zalthara turned toward the guards. "Leave us." The guards hesitated for only a moment before bowing and stepping out of the chamber. The heavy doors shut behind them, leaving Ethan alone with the Queen. Zalthara walked over to a nearby console and pressed a few buttons. A part of the wall shifted, revealing a large observation window. Ethan stepped closer, his breath catching slightly at the sight beyond. It was a massive training arena, filled with Xilari warriors in combat drills. Some fought with energy weapons, others with their bare hands. Every movement was calculated, precise, efficient. There was no hesitation, no wasted effort. Zalthara gestured toward the scene. "This is how my people live. Every Xilari is trained for battle from childhood. Our empire thrives because we do not allow weakness." Ethan nodded. He had heard about the Xilari's warrior culture before. They were known for their discipline, their strategy, their refusal to surrender. And yet, the Queen continued, "We have never won against humans in the way we expect. Your people are physically weaker, yet you survive. You should fall, yet you rise." She turned back to him. "You say it is because of emotions, bonds, connection. Show me." Ethan swallowed. "You want me to show you emotions?" Zalthara's golden eyes locked onto his. "Teach me how to bond as humans do." Ethan took a deep breath. This was dangerous. He was standing before the most powerful ruler of an alien empire, and she was asking him to teach her something that even humans struggle to explain. But he also knew this was an opportunity. If the Xilari Queen truly wished to understand humanity, this could change the future. "All right," he said slowly, "but you have to understand, human bonding isn't just about words or actions. It's about trust." Zalthara's expression remained unreadable. "Trust is earned in my culture." Ethan nodded. "Same for humans. But it takes time." "Then we will start now." She moved toward another console and pressed a few buttons. The lights in the chamber dimmed slightly, and the air shifted. A moment later, a hidden doorway opened in the side of the room, leading into a smaller chamber. Ethan hesitated. "What is this?" "A controlled environment," the Queen said simply. "If we are to study human bonding, we must spend time in close quarters. You will remain here with me for the next phase of our discussions. Ethan blinked. You're putting me in isolation with you. Zalthara's lips curled slightly. Do you fear it? Ethan sighed. Not fear, just surprise. The queen stepped inside the chamber and gestured for him to follow. With no real choice, Ethan walked in. The door sealed behind them with a soft hum. The room was different from the rest of the Scifi palace. It was smaller, with softer lighting and a more comfortable design. A large seating area was at the center, and to his surprise, there were books, human books, on one of the shelves. Zalthara sat down, her movements graceful. Let us begin. Ethan slowly took a seat across from her. All right. First question. Have you ever formed any kind of personal bond before? The queen was silent for a moment. Then she answered, no. Ethan exhaled. Then we start from the beginning. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing. This was going to be an experience unlike any other. Ethan sat across from Queen Zalthara in the quiet chamber, the air thick with tension and curiosity. The queen's golden eyes studied him intently, waiting for him to speak. He had been in difficult diplomatic situations before, but nothing quite like this. The most powerful ruler of an alien empire had just admitted she had never formed a personal bond before. And now, she wanted him to teach her. Ethan leaned back slightly. All right, let's start with something simple. When you interact with others, what do you focus on? Zalthara did not hesitate. Efficiency, strength, purpose. Ethan nodded. That makes sense. But for humans, relationships are different. We connect through trust, emotions, and understanding. The queen's brow furrowed slightly. Trust is earned through proving oneself in battle. Emotions are weaknesses that cloud judgment. And understanding. She paused. Understanding comes from knowledge. But knowledge alone does not create bonds, does it? Ethan smiled slightly. No, it doesn't. Knowledge helps, but real connection happens when two people share experiences, when they feel safe around each other. Zalthara tilted her head. Feeling safe with another? Ethan nodded. Yes, that's what trust is. You believe the other person won't harm you, won't betray you. You know they'll be there when you need them. The queen was silent for a moment, considering his words. Then she stood up and walked over to a console on the wall. With a swift movement, she pressed a few buttons, and the large observation window changed. Instead of warriors training, it now showed a distant battlefield. Ethan frowned. What is this? A war zone, Zalthara said calmly. A battle between two of our rival colonies. They fight for dominance. There is no room for trust, only victory. Ethan watched as Scifi soldiers clashed in brutal, efficient combat. Their movements were precise, their strategies flawless, but there was something missing. They fight alone, he said softly. Zalthara turned to him. What do you mean? Ethan pointed at the screen. They don't rely on each other. They don't protect each other. They fight for themselves. The queen's expression remained unreadable. That is our way. Each warrior is strong alone. We do not need others to survive. Ethan shook his head. That's the difference between humans and Scifi. Humans survive because we stand together. We fight for each other, not just for ourselves. Zalthara studied the battlefield again, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. You say trust and connection make you stronger. Prove it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. How? The queen turned back to him. We will conduct a test. You will demonstrate this human bond you speak of. Ethan sighed. He had expected this. The queen was a ruler of logic and strategy. She wouldn't just take his words at face value. All right, he said. What do you have in mind? Zalthara pressed another button on the console, and a new section of the room shifted. A panel opened in the wall, revealing a small arena with two energy staffs resting in the center. A duel, she said simply. You and I will face each other. You will show me how human trust works. Ethan frowned. A fight. But I thought we were talking about bonding. The queen's lips curled slightly. If you truly believe in what you say, then show me. I will not hold back. You must prove that trust is more than just words. Ethan exhaled. He wasn't a soldier, but he had basic combat training. More importantly, he knew this wasn't just about fighting. It was about showing her what it meant to trust. All right, he said, stepping forward. Let's do this. He picked up one of the energy staffs. It hummed to life in his hands, a faint blue glow tracing along its edges. Zalthera took the other staff, her movements fluid and practiced. The moment Ethan took his stance, the queen attacked. She moved fast, faster than he expected. He barely had time to block as her staff came swinging toward his side. The force of the impact sent a shock through his arms. Ethan gritted his teeth and adjusted his grip. He couldn't match her strength or speed, but he didn't have to. He had to show her something different. He dodged the next attack and quickly repositioned himself. Instead of fighting aggressively, he focused on defense, on reading her movements, reacting, and adapting. Zalthera's eyes gleamed with curiosity as she tested his reflexes. You hesitate. Why? Ethan blocked another strike. Because I'm not here to win. I'm here to show you something. The queen suddenly changed tactics. She aimed a sweeping strike at his legs, forcing him to jump back. But instead of pressing forward, Ethan did something unexpected. He dropped his guard. Zalthera's staff stopped inches from his chest. The chamber was silent. The queen's expression flickered with something unreadable. Why did you stop? Ethan took a deep breath. Because trust isn't about winning. It's about knowing the other person won't take advantage of you. For the first time, Zalthera hesitated. She slowly lowered her weapon. You trusted me not to strike. Ethan nodded. Yes. The queen studied him carefully. Then, to his surprise, she deactivated her staff and placed it back on the wall. This is not how my people fight, she said softly. We do not hesitate. We do not show mercy. Ethan smiled. Maybe that's why you've never understood human bonds. Zalthera was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned away from the arena. Perhaps there is something to learn after all. Ethan exhaled, feeling the tension in the room shift slightly. He had taken the first step in showing her what it meant to trust. But he had a feeling this was only the beginning. The duel had ended, but its impact lingered. Ethan could see it in Queen Zalthera's eyes. Confusion, curiosity, and something else. Something deeper. She had always believed that strength was about dominance, about never showing weakness. Yet, for the first time, she had seen a different kind of strength, one that came from trust. As she stood in silence, processing what had happened, Ethan took a deep breath. So, what do you think? Zalthera turned to him, her golden gaze intense. I think you are either incredibly foolish, or you understand something I do not. Ethan chuckled. Maybe both. The queen narrowed her eyes slightly, but there was no hostility in her expression. Instead, there was intrigue. You trusted me not to strike you down when you were vulnerable. Ethan nodded. Yes. Zalthera crossed her arms. But I could have. But you didn't. Ethan took a step closer, his voice calm. Because, for a moment, you understood what trust feels like. You hesitated. The queen was silent for a long moment. Then, with a slight sigh, she gestured for him to follow. Come with me. They walked through the corridors of the palace, past the towering guards and the ever-watchful advisors. Ethan noticed that Zalthera's steps were slower than before, as if deep in thought. Finally, they entered a private chamber, a room Ethan had not seen before. Unlike the grand halls of the palace, this room was smaller, more personal. A large, star-filled window stretched across one wall, and in the center of the room was a table with a holographic map of the Scifi Empire. Zalthera gestured to the map. Tell me, Ethan, do you know why my empire has lasted for centuries? Ethan studied the glowing display. Because your people are strong. The Queen nodded. Yes, strength has ensured our survival, but strength alone is not enough. We rule through discipline, through control. Every Xilari knows their duty, their purpose. She paused. But trust? That is not our way. Ethan crossed his arms. And yet, you're starting to see its value. Zalthara's lips pressed together, but she did not deny it. Instead, she turned back to the map. If trust is truly as powerful as you say, then prove it to me again. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Another test. The Queen nodded, but this time, not with words, not with training weapons. She tapped the holographic map, zooming in on a distant planet. There is a colony on the outer rim of my empire. A rebel faction has taken control of it. I was planning to send my warriors to eliminate them. Ethan frowned. You mean wipe them out completely? Zalthara's expression remained cold. It is the most efficient solution. Ethan shook his head. There's another way. The Queen studied him carefully. Then tell me, human, if you were in my place, what would you do? Ethan took a deep breath. I'd talk to them first, find out why they rebelled. Maybe there's a way to solve this without bloodshed. Zalthara let out a soft, skeptical laugh. And what if they refuse? What if they see kindness as weakness? Ethan met her gaze. Then at least you tried. And if they do refuse, you can still act. But trust has to start somewhere. For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. Then, slowly, she turned back to the map. Very well, Ethan. We will do things your way, for now. Hours later, Ethan found himself standing on the bridge of Zalthara's personal warship. The vessel was en route to the rebel colony, and tension filled the air. The Queen's elite guards stood at attention, their hands resting on their weapons. They clearly did not approve of this plan, but they dared not question their ruler. Zalthara sat in her command chair, her golden eyes fixed on the planet ahead. You will speak to them first, she said, her voice firm. If your method fails, my warriors will handle the rest. Ethan exhaled. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start. All right, let's do this. The ship descended toward the colony. Outside, Ethan could see the ruins of a once thriving city. The rebels had taken control of the main settlement, and their defenses were raised. A transmission came through. A rough, distorted voice filled the ship. You are not welcome here, Queen Zalthara. The Queen did not react. Instead, she turned to Ethan. This is your chance, human. Convince them. Ethan stepped forward and activated the communicator. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm here to talk. There was silence on the other end. Then a different voice replied. Talk. What could a human possibly say that would change anything? Ethan took a deep breath. I want to understand. Tell me why you're fighting. Another pause. Then, finally, the voice responded. Fine. But if you try anything, you won't leave this planet alive. Ethan turned to Zalthara. She gave him a slow nod. Go, she said. Show me if your way truly works. As the shuttle descended toward the surface, Ethan couldn't help but wonder. Had he just made the biggest mistake of his life? The shuttle descended through the dark clouds, the colony's ruined cityscape coming into view below. Ethan Carter tightened his grip on the seat's edge as turbulence shook the small craft. He could see the remnants of battle, collapsed buildings, scorched streets, and makeshift barricades. The rebels had turned this once thriving Xilari settlement into a fortress. Sitting beside him, Queen Zalthara watched silently, her golden eyes unreadable. This was a test, not just of Ethan's ability to negotiate, but of the very concept of trust. If he failed, the Queen's warriors would strike, and the colony would be lost. The shuttle landed in an open square, where a group of armed rebels stood waiting. Their weapons were trained on the ship, their faces filled with suspicion. Ethan exhaled and stood up. You stay here, he told Zalthara. If they see you, they'll assume this is a trap. The Queen raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She simply leaned back in her seat, watching as the shuttle's doors opened. Ethan stepped out. A tall, battle-worn Silari male approached, his dark armor scratched and dented from countless fights. His deep blue skin was marked with scars, and his piercing black eyes studied Ethan with clear distrust. "You are the human," the rebel leader said. "I am Commander Vekar. You have one chance to speak. Choose your words carefully." Ethan nodded. "I came here to understand. You're fighting against the Queen's rule. Why?" Vekar let out a sharp laugh. "You truly do not know." He gestured to the ruined city around them. "This was once our home. The Queen's forces took it from us, drove us out, and called it order. But we are not mindless subjects. We refuse to bow." Ethan frowned. "Then why not seek peace? Why fight until everything is destroyed?" Vekar's expression darkened. "Because peace under her rule is slavery." Ethan crossed his arms. "She thinks you're just rebels trying to cause chaos." Vekar scoffed. "That is the lie she tells herself." Ethan studied the rebel leader carefully. There was no blind rage in his voice, only conviction. "If she agreed to hear you out, would you listen?" Vekar narrowed his eyes. "Why should I? She would never do the same for us." Ethan took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "That's why I'm here. I convinced her to give trust a chance." Vekar's gaze sharpened. "And if you fail?" Ethan hesitated. "Then she will attack." A heavy silence settled between them. The rebel leader looked back at his soldiers, then at the ruins of his home. He let out a slow exhale. "Very well, human. I will listen, but only under one condition." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" Vekar's face hardened. "She must come here. Alone." Ethan's stomach tightened. He knew this was dangerous. If Salthera stepped foot on rebel-controlled land, she would be at their mercy. But this was also an opportunity. Ethan turned back toward the shuttle. Zalthera was already standing at the entrance, her arms crossed. She had heard everything. "Well, human," she asked, "do you trust them?" Ethan met her gaze. "If I didn't, I wouldn't be here." For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. Then, to everyone's shock, she stepped down from the shuttle and walked toward Vekar. Her guards tensed, their hands on their weapons, but she raised a single hand, stopping them. She now stood face to face with her enemy. "Speak," she commanded. "Convince me why I should not crush your rebellion." Vekar did not flinch. "Because you already lost," he said. "You think control is power, but if you had true power, we would not be standing here." Zalthera's eyes flashed, but Ethan noticed something. She did not strike him down. She was listening. Vekar continued, "We do not fight because we enjoy war. We fight because we want freedom. You claim to rule with strength, but the strongest rulers do not rule through fear. They rule because their people believe in them." Zalthera remained silent. Ethan took a step forward. "He's right. You saw it when we trained together. Trust is stronger than fear." The Queen exhaled. "And what do you propose, rebel?" Vekar hesitated for the first time. He had not expected her to ask. But then he straightened. "A new order, one where we are not just subjects, but equals." A tense moment passed. The rebel soldiers looked ready for a fight. The Queen's guards were the same. Then Zalthera did something no one expected. She extended her hand. "A test," she said. "You want to be equals. Then prove it. You will govern this colony as you see fit, but if chaos returns, I will take it back." Vekar stared at her hand as if it were a weapon. Slowly, he reached out and shook it. A deal had been made. For the first time, war had been avoided. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had done it. As the Queen turned back to him, there was something different in her gaze. "Perhaps trust is not as weak as I thought." The air inside the ruined colony felt heavy with tension. For the first time in history, Queen Zalthera had shaken hands with a rebel leader. A single moment, yet it carried the weight of an entire war. The soldiers on both sides stood frozen, uncertain whether to lower their weapons or prepare for a final battle. Ethan Carter let out a slow breath. He had done what seemed impossible. He had brought two enemies to the same table. But the work wasn't over. Zalthera turned to him, her golden eyes sharp. "You have forced my hand, human. I have given them a chance. Now tell me, what happens if they fail?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Then we help them succeed." Vakar, the rebel leader, narrowed his eyes. "You expect us to trust her, the queen who crushed our homes?" Zalthera raised an eyebrow. "You would rather keep fighting?" Vakar clenched his jaw. His soldiers looked uneasy, but they said nothing. It was clear that none of them wanted to continue a war that had already taken so much from them. Ethan stepped between them. "Look, neither of you have to trust each other completely. Not yet, but you both know that continuing this war will only lead to destruction." Zalthera and Vakar locked eyes. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Vakar sighed. "Very well, human, but I will not accept her rule. We will govern ourselves." Zalthera smirked. "Then govern wisely. Fail, and I will return." It wasn't a perfect agreement, but it was enough. The rebels began lowering their weapons, and the Queen's guards did the same. Slowly, the tension in the air started to fade. Days later, Ethan sat on the balcony of the Queen's worship, watching the colony from above. The city was still damaged, but something new had taken root. Hope. The Queen's forces had withdrawn, allowing Vakar and his people to rebuild. For the first time, there was no war, no fighting. Zalthera approached him, standing beside him as she observed the city below. "You have changed my world, human." Ethan smirked. "For better or worse?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed a hand on the railing, her sharp nails tapping against the metal. "I once believed strength was measured by how much one could control. But now, I see strength in something else." Ethan glanced at her. "And what's that?" Her golden eyes met his. "Trust." Ethan grinned. "Took you long enough." Zalthera chuckled. "A rare sound, almost musical. Do not get arrogant, human. You may have changed my mind, but my empire still stands. And now, I must change theirs." She was right. Convincing her was only the first step. The rest of the Celari Empire would not accept this peace so easily. There would be resistance, doubt, and perhaps even betrayal. But Ethan had hope. "Then let's get to work." The Queen smirked. "Yes, human. Let us begin." As the warship flew away, leaving behind a colony that had found its freedom, Ethan knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning.